No more $200 tax stamp on suppressors and short-barreled rifles. Yeah, you heard that right.
However, the Trump DOJ continues to argue that the NFA's restrictions on suppressors does not violate the Second Amendment.
The Vice President votes in the affirmative. The bill as amended is passed.
Gun retailers are reporting a surge in the sale of gun silencers since January 4th.
We all know the NFA was nonsense from day one, a relic from nearly a century ago.
A unanimous decision just came down from the Ninth Circuit, and it didn't just crack the foundation of suppressor regulation in America, it obliterated it entirely. Not a single dissenting opinion, not one judge pushed back, and the shockwaves from this ruling are about to ripple through every corner of firearms law, the gun industry, law enforcement, international policy, and the very future of the Second Amendment itself. What's about to unfold over the next 12 to 24 months will reshape gun ownership in ways that nobody, not even the most optimistic firearms attorneys, saw coming. So let's break this down piece by piece, because the implications here are absolutely massive, and most people are only scratching the surface. Let's start where it hits hardest and fastest, your wallet. Right now, as we speak, there are roughly 347,000 Americans sitting in limbo with pending Form 4 applications. Each one of those people paid a $200 tax stamp. That adds up to just under $69.4 million that the Treasury Department is now legally obligated to return. The refund process runs through the IRS, either as direct deposits or physical checks, with a court-mandated deadline of April 23, 2026. That's the hard cutoff, 90 days from the order. But here's where it gets really interesting, because the refund money is honestly the smallest part of this financial earthquake. Industry analysts are projecting that suppressor prices will crater by 30 to 40% within 6 months. Why? Because manufacturers are about to ramp production by as much as 400% to meet what they're calling unleashed demand. Companies like Psycho, Dead Air, and Surefire have already publicly announced major expansion plans, new facilities, new equipment, new hires. The elimination of that brutal 11-month wait time changes the entire retail equation. For the first time ever, gun stores can actually stock suppressors on shelves the way they stock optics or magazines. No more managing months-long special orders. No more tying up capital and inventory that sits in regulatory purgatory. And then there's the secondary market, which is about to undergo the most dramatic transformation of all. Previously, if you wanted to sell a registered suppressor, the buyer had to go through another Form 4 transfer with another 11-month wait. That effectively killed the used suppressor market dead. Now, a used suppressor transfers with a simple background check, just like any other firearm. Expect thousands of suppressors to flood the secondary market almost immediately as owners upgrade, downsize, or liquidate collections they were previously trapped with. Now do the full math on this. Eliminating the $200 tax plus the average $700 dealer transfer fee means Americans save roughly $900 per suppressor purchase. For those 347,000 pending applications alone, that's over $312 million in regulatory costs that just vanished overnight. Scale that forward across future purchases, and you're looking at billions of dollars staying in consumers' pockets instead of funding bureaucratic overhead. This is, without exaggeration, the single largest transfer of wealth from government coffers back to gun owners in American history. But the money story is just the appetizer. The real chaos is happening inside the industry itself, and almost nobody is prepared for it. Current manufacturing capacity across all suppressor companies handles roughly 400,000 units per year. There are approximately 200 million gun owners in this country who now have essentially frictionless access to suppressors. Industry projections estimate demand could hit 2 million units in year one alone. Every major manufacturer is adding shifts, purchasing CNC machines, and desperately trying to hire machinists, except there aren't enough qualified machinists to go around. The skilled labor shortage in precision manufacturing was already a problem before this ruling. Now it's a full-blown crisis. The raw material supply chain is buckling under the pressure. Suppressor baffles require very specific grades of titanium, stainless steel, and Inconel alloys. Lead times for these materials have already doubled from 8 weeks to 16. Several mid-sized manufacturers are reporting that they're locking in long-term supply contracts at prices 40% higher than early 2025 rates, just to guarantee they'll have material to work with. And retail infrastructure? Completely unprepared. Most gun stores carry 0 suppressors on their shelves because the old Form 4 process made inventory costs prohibitive. Now, they need to stock suppressors like they stock accessories, and the National Shooting Sports Foundation estimates retailers will need to invest somewhere between $1.2 and $2 billion in suppressor inventory to meet initial demand. Smaller shops that can't access that kind of capital are going to lose significant market share to larger retailers almost overnight. There's also the testing and certification bottleneck. Every new suppressor model requires federal approval and testing, and manufacturers currently wait 6 to 9 months for new model approvals. The existing backlog contains over 300 designs awaiting evaluation. At current processing speeds, it would take 2 years just to clear the pending queue, while new designs are being submitted faster than they can possibly be reviewed. Distribution networks are simultaneously reorganizing around direct-to-consumer models. Companies that built their entire business around managing Form 4 paperwork are now pivoting to high-volume direct sales with same-day approval processing. The entire suppressor industry is essentially being rebuilt from the ground up within a 6-month window. Now here's where things get legally treacherous, and this is the part that could genuinely put people in danger if they're not paying close attention. The state-level confusion is unprecedented. A resident of California can now legally purchase a suppressor under federal law, pass a background check, take physical possession, and immediately be committing a state felony carrying up to 3 years in prison under Penal Code Section 33410. Federal agents no longer have jurisdiction to enforce suppressor regulations that no longer exist, but state police absolutely do have authority to arrest and prosecute under state law. New York's situation is even more severe. State law classifies suppressors as dangerous weapons with mandatory minimum sentences that judges cannot reduce below. And here's where it gets truly bizarre. District attorneys in conservative upstate counties have already announced they won't prosecute suppressor possession, while prosecutors in New York City have vowed aggressive enforcement. So legality literally depends on which county you happen to be standing in. This creates what legal commentators are calling a suppressor Berlin Wall. A Nevada resident buys a suppressor freely. Their neighbor across the California border faces felony charges for the same item. An Arizona resident legally purchases a suppressor in Phoenix, drives 2 hours west, crosses the state line, and becomes a criminal. Interstate travel with suppressors is now a legal minefield for anyone living in or near a banned state. The constitutional pathway forward runs through the 14th Amendment. Since the 14th Amendment applies Second Amendment protections against state governments, the argument is straightforward. States cannot constitutionally prohibit what the federal government cannot constitutionally prohibit. California already has a pending suppressor ban challenge that was stayed while waiting for federal developments. That stay lifts immediately, and legal experts estimate California's ban falls within 12 months. But the safety dimension of all this is something almost nobody is talking about, and it matters enormously. The knowledge gap among everyday gun owners is staggering. Most recreational shooters have never handled a suppressor. They don't understand that a suppressed firearm still produces 130 to 140 decibels, loud enough to still require hearing protection. They don't know that suppressors need periodic disassembly and cleaning, or that carbon buildup causes baffle strikes. They've never experienced the point of impact shift that occurs when you attach a suppressor, or the increased gas blowback on certain rifle platforms. Liability attorneys are already working overtime. If someone injures themselves through suppressor misuse, the liability chain gets complicated fast. Manufacturers face product liability exposure, retailers face negligence claims for selling without guidance, and ranges face premises liability for allowing unsafe use. Insurance companies are already revising policies and hiking premiums for suppressor-related coverage. The training infrastructure to handle millions of new suppressor owners simply doesn't exist yet. Currently, suppressor education is niche, mostly law enforcement and dedicated enthusiasts. Scaling that to mass market levels requires developing standardized curricula, certifying thousands of instructors, and integrating suppressor education into basic firearms courses. Major organizations have announced crash programs to develop materials, but they openly acknowledge they're months behind the demand curve. Most public ranges still ban suppressors due to insurance restrictions and outdated policies, and industry groups estimate 15 to 20% of ranges will initially refuse to allow suppressed fire rather than invest in the safety updates required. Meanwhile, the political backlash machine started spinning within hours of the decision. Emergency legislation was introduced in California to expand the state's suppressor ban with enhanced penalties, including mandatory 5-year sentences. New York proposed making suppressor possession a violent felony ineligible for plea bargaining. At the federal level, legislation was introduced that would ban civilian suppressor possession nationwide, criminalize existing ownership, and mandate confiscation with compensation capped at $100 per unit regardless of what the owner actually paid. That bill reportedly has 38 Senate co-sponsors and is being fast-tracked through committee. Gun control organizations are flooding every media outlet with claims that suppressors enable mass violence. Studies are being cited claiming deregulation will cause a 25% increase in firearm homicides. Emergency motions have been filed seeking to stay the court's decision pending Supreme Court review. Anti-gun politicians are pressuring the ATF to resist implementation through regulatory interpretation, slow walk approvals, create new paperwork requirements, or simply refuse to issue refunds by claiming budgetary constraints. And looming over all of this is the Supreme Court, which becomes the ultimate battleground. Emergency petitions are being prepared asking the court to freeze the Ninth Circuit's decision and grant full review. The argument is that the ruling creates circuit splits and threatens public safety. But here's the critical detail. The government itself confessed error in this case, meaning it agreed the regulations were unconstitutional. That makes this a poor vehicle for the court to use in establishing broad precedent, and many conservative legal scholars believe the court will simply decline to hear it. But if they do take it up, implementation could be frozen for 18 to 24 months. The dominoes don't stop at suppressors. 3 lawsuits challenging short-barreled rifle provisions were filed within 18 hours of this decision, all strategically placed in the Ninth Circuit to leverage binding precedent. The legal arguments mirror the suppressor case almost exactly. Millions of units prove common use, no founding-era analog exists for barrel-length restrictions, and the tax functions as unconstitutional prior restraint. Legal experts are giving these challenges a 95% success probability. And then there's the most explosive domino of all, the 1986 machine gun ban. The logic from this suppressor ruling applies directly. You cannot argue something is unusual when government regulations are the very thing preventing it from becoming common. Before the 1986 ban, machine gun registrations were growing at 15,000 to 20,000 per year. Continuing that growth rate would mean over 1 million registered machine guns today, easily clearing common use thresholds. Major legal organizations have confirmed they're preparing challenges to the machine gun ban for filing within 6 months, recruiting plaintiffs who are licensed manufacturers currently possessing post-1986 dealer samples. The international implications are equally significant. American suppressor manufacturers dominate global production but face strict export controls. Those controls relied heavily on the existence of domestic regulation as justification. With that justification gone, the legal basis for export restrictions weakens dramatically, potentially opening billions of dollars in international markets. Allied nations that cited American regulations when justifying their own suppressor restrictions are now facing uncomfortable questions from their own citizens about why their laws are more restrictive than America's. And technologically, the innovation floodgates are wide open. Modular suppressor systems, advanced ceramic and carbon fiber materials, integrated barrel suppressor assemblies, even smart suppressors with electronic monitoring, all of these were held back by regulatory timelines that made innovation financially suicidal. That barrier is gone. Expect to see prototypes and products hitting the market at a pace this industry has never experienced. What we're witnessing isn't just a single court ruling about one category of firearm accessory. This is the opening chapter of a constitutional transformation that will redefine the boundaries of the Second Amendment for generations. The legal, political, industrial, and technological implications are still unfolding in real time, and every gun owner in America needs to understand what's coming. That's it for today, folks. See you in the next video.